to another episode of Women of Her Story, a podcast dedicated to celebrating women who have made or are making their mark on our society. Today, I have with me up-and-coming LA-based sci-fi superhero film writer and director, Kylie Eaton. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kylie.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. How's your day going so far?
It's going okay. You know, I can say that I am healthy and safe and hunkered down here in LA, which is a bit of a hot spot right now, but I'm staying inside and, you know, getting a lot of work done, which is, you know, the best I could ask for right now.
You know, absolutely. You know, nothing like a little being stuck at home to motivate you to do that extra work you didn't want to do in the first place.
Exactly. That's, you know, I have nothing to distract me, so.
You have a new sci-fi superhero film, KINETIC, currently being shown in the Indie Shorts International Festival. Can you tell us about the film?
Absolutely. So KINETIC is a proof of concept for a feature-length script that I have. And the story of KINETIC is about Jess, who is a 14-year-old girl that develops supernatural powers and then is exploited by her criminal family to use those powers for their own sort of devious ends. And through working more with her aunt and uncle in their underground business, she learns more about her connection with her absent mother and has to make the choice of whether loyalty to family trumps your own sort of moral compass or not.
Oh,
yeah. So that's sort of the overall story of KINETIC in the feature. So once I wrote the feature, it placed as a finalist in the Screencraft 2019 Sci-Fi and Fantasy competition. And from there, I decided to make a proof of concept film just to sort of, you know, show the world, introduce the characters, sort of, you know, show the tone of it. And originally, I just thought of it as something to send out with the script, but I was very happy with how the proof of concept turned out. And so I submitted it to Indie Shorts, and I'm excited that it'll have its world premiere there. Or I guess it with the online festival, it's happening.
Yeah. How did you come up with this concept?
You know, I love superhero films. I love sci-fi films, fantasy, all of that kind of stuff. And I just, a couple, I don't know, Christmases ago, I was at a movie theater watching another like superhero film, and it was about sort of like a son and his father's legacy and all of that. And I'm like, where's like the mother-daughter stories in these films? Because that's a subject that I really find interesting to explore in my work, and I find it lacking a lot in that genre. And you know, thankfully, I think we're moving towards that, but I really wanted to see more of that. And so I'm from the Midwest. I really wanted to write a film very centered in the Midwest, not just set there, but sort of like using the environment and, you know, playing on, you know, cornfields and tornadoes and all of these sort of like very Midwestern feeling things. And, you know, so I came up with sort of the setting, and then I, you know, came up with the family dynamic was really sort of my Peter Parker story. It's like, you know, also like I love Spider-Man, and I love like the recent Spider-Mans that Marvel's been doing, I think are great. But when I watch them, I think to myself, like, would a teenager necessarily be like, I have these powers, I want to do good with them?
Yeah.
Maybe like a small percentage, but I think like most teenagers would be like, how can I like get out of doing schoolwork, or like get money, or like get a cute boyfriend or girlfriend? Like I think that, you know, the instant thought when a teenager gets superpowers wouldn't necessarily be like to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You know? And I was like, how do you set that up? And you know, for me that was like, have a family that's not teaching them that. That's not the uncle saying like, with great power comes responsibility. Like, have an aunt that's like, you have power, great, we owe our like dealers some money, come like unlock a safe for us, or, you know, like I think that so I kind of like came up with this idea of like, what would a kid in that situation, how would they deal with that when they don't necessarily have like a great parental figure in their life that's teaching them right from wrong, and sort of has to figure that out on their own. So really the superpowers are just like a fun way to explore sort of our own sense of morality and sort of coming of age and learning your own sort of sense of that when you don't have like a great resource in your life to teach you that.
Yeah, that's such an interesting concept, because I'm thinking about all of the superhero films I've recently watched, and they generally have this like really excellent unearthly moral guide, whether or not it's officially taught to them. It's just like innately there, and we're just like, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm like that.
Right. And if it's not, then that's the villain. The villain is the one that like, is doing the bad stuff, and the good guys already have the sense of like ethical behavior. And I mean, it was cool when they touched on it a little bit with like the Sokovia Accords and like collateral damage, but I mean, that's sort of an afterthought of like,
that's not
what's actually going on.
And or it's like with like the like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of situation where they're completely separated. They're not even together in the, it's two different brains in one being.
It's
instead
like
of
Bruce Banner good, the Hulk bad, instead of like Bruce Banner's a guy that's like dealing with how to, juggle good and evil and right and wrong. And so I think, as the film going audience gets more sophisticated, and to be very honest, I'm a big Marvel fan, but I'm not necessarily a comic book fan. I've never been able to read and look at pictures at the same time. Like if I read, I want to make the pictures in my head. It's a weird quirk, but I think the comics do get a little more into that gray area. But I think as film going audiences get a little more savvy and sort of ask a little bit more of the films, I think hopefully that's the way it'll go. But I just figured, why not do it myself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like people in general are starting to want more from their characters. They want them to be held accountable for the mass destruction of New York City, or where you're like, how did you destroy the city and it's fine?
And you're heroes?
That's okay now?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Are you familiar with Gwenpool?
I am not. Is that like a Deadpool Spider Gwen?
It sounds sort of like it is.
Do you?
It's not, but you should look her up, because it is it's one of the only, it actually is the only series of comics that I own. Well, I do love Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, but the comics that I own, Gwenpool, she battles a lot with her loyalty to herself, but also she does break the fourth wall like Deadpool, but they're not related. It's hard to explain. You would like it, I think.
I'll check it out.
I honestly actually can't believe it hasn't been adapted. But as I say that, it is a female lead, so I can believe that it hasn't been adapted.
It seems like in those worlds, it's like, oh, we've done everyone else. Who haven't we shown yet? We're like digging at the bottom of the barrel to find some new character to beat her. So but I get that.
She's so funny. So you mentioned being from the Midwest, and this and KINETIC being centered in taking place in the Midwest. So why was it important to shoot on location for this film?
I kind of went back and forth with it just because of, honestly, logistics. I'm based in LA. I've been out here for a while now. I've mostly shot everything out here. I know what it's going to be like. I know what the locations are. I know how to get a permit. I know tons of people, right? So that it's easy, you know,
Right.
I mean, as easy as filmmaking can be. But, you know, I was sort of going back and forth of like, well, what can I find to like double as a cornfield? Like, do we do it completely in VFX? Like, how, you know, there are like sort of fields here, but they're not cornfields if you go far enough out. And the first thing was like anything to get any sort of look of not in the city, like you're gonna have to travel a couple hours and put people up overnight anyway, right? So you're already kind of shooting in a different city,
right?
And so that was like, it just, I was trying to like, you know what they say, like shove a square peg in a round hole. So last summer, the film I had done previously to this, Dispel, just so happened to be playing at two festivals in Indianapolis about a week apart. One of which was also Indie Shorts. I played there last year as well. And so it just sort of seemed like the universe being like, go ahead, go to the Midwest and shoot. And so it was great. I grew up in Illinois. I grew up about 3 hours away from where we shot in Indiana. So, you know, the landscape is very much the same, but I didn't have any sort of personal connection to it. But through a friend of a friend, I met a producer out there, Dakota Taylor, who was like, like saved my butt, like just knew everything about where to get crew, where to get equipment, how to like make it all happen, which was an amazing resource to have. And so, yeah, I kind of just, once I got into those festivals and like looked at the dates, and that was kind of around when I was going to shoot, it just seemed like the natural thing to do. And, you know, it was really nice to shoot something outside of LA, just because once you've shot here so much, and I'm sure it's a similar thing in New York, where like you've shot the things you're going to shoot, you know, it's like I recognize so many locations and films now, and I'm like, well, I've shot there, done it, you know, been there, done that. Like I want something new. I want like, because there's not a ton of like outdoor space in LA that doesn't look like LA. So if you're trying to dump over somewhere else, you probably already done it, you know, or like your friend did it in their short film.
Yeah. And then it's already like,
like you just recognize it. You're like, oh, that's Cedar Grove and Griffith Park. Like, I've seen it in a million short films, like a bunch of, you know, everything. Right. So it was just like a fresh perspective on filmmaking, which was really nice, just to like get to look at, you know, shooting through a new like lens. I'm so sorry to use that metaphor. I wish there was a better one, but it's like literally and figuratively like shooting through a new lens. You know, and like getting to like be in the Midwest in the summer just like brought back all that like sense memory of like being a kid in the summer, and like being a teenager, like being someone Jess's age, sort of like the like, you know, what do they call it, like the like lazy dog days of summer, where you're just like, it just feels never ending. And so it was like, I think it was really helpful to making it to like be, not only to have like some interesting visuals, but to like to be in that sort of like headspace, because you're physically back in that environment, and like it's the same quality of like humid air, and you just like, I connected to like that teenage self of mine so much easier being back there.
Right. And you know, kind of what you were saying about recognizing all of these other random places in LA that you've shot at before, your friends have shot at before. I would imagine that it's hard to get those specific films out of your head while you're trying to shoot this new one. And so, you know, where you're like, did I do this shot last time? Like this exact shot? This feels the same. Yeah,
it is like, you know, you can't like, there's only so many ways you can cover a space, right? You know, I mean, there's many, and there's different ways to go about sort of making things feel fresh and new, but it's so much easier when you're just in a new space and able to sort of, you know, even in pulling reference like images for this, there's not like a ton of films that are like in cornfields. And I mean, there are some that like, obviously, you know, Field of Dreams or Signs or whatever,
Children
like there are Children of the Corn, right? You know, but it's not as plentiful as other sort of locations. So
Right.
it kind of gives you the freedom to like play around with that sort
Mm-hmm.
of like visual sense of it. And you know, it was a very interesting thing because also Man of Steel shoots at a big cornfield and Interstellar. And so I was looking those films up and I was like, where did they shoot these? And they just planted their own acres and acres of corn. Yeah, like I don't remember. I think Interstellar was in Canada somewhere and they just planted corn just so they could like drive through it and shoot in it, which is ridiculous. That's like a year of planning, you know, for those shots. And I was like, of course Nolan gets to plant his own cornfields, like so crazy.
That
but
is insane.
you know, it's just
you would think that's more expensive.
the scope of that is so crazy.
Oh my gosh, that is,
you know, I think, I don't know, I think when you're at that point you get to just be like, I want it to look exactly how I want it to look.
Yeah, I want these 3 corn stalks to be exactly right here. Oh wow, that's
which
so
you know, it does sound fun, but also, you know, there's a lot of cornfields to shoot around in the Midwest, so I say go for one of those.
Was there with where you shot, was there already existing structures that you were able to use on the property, or did you use different structures?
Basically everything was shot in like on one road basically. We went out, my DP and I location scouting, you know, during a day and outside, probably about 45 minutes outside of Indianapolis. We shot like right between Indianapolis and Bloomington. And so it's just all these like small towns and farming towns and, you know, things that you don't even call a town, that, you know, just like random groupings of houses. Yeah, exactly. So we just like drove around and knocked on people's doors and we're like, hey, can we shoot at your house? And we got like 30 no's. And then one person was like, no, but maybe my neighbor. And we were like, okay. And they were like, he'll be home from work at 6. And we're like, we'll be at his door at 6:05. And it was at the end of this long dead-end road that bordered a cornfield on one side and a soybean field on the other side. And it turns out the guy was just like, you know, around my age, early 30s, like big movie fan, had bookcases full of like sci-fi and fantasy novels. And I was like, if anyone's going to be the person, it's this guy. And he was like, he was all for it. He was like super down, had 2 very adorable dogs, which really like the dogs liked me. So I was like, okay, like now he knows I'm a good person because the dogs like me. But yeah, he was great, and we shot in his house and then like outside on his road, all the cornfield stuff. And so it was like, it was easy. We didn't have to do any company moves. We shot like 1 full day and then a half day, and he let us use his like really cool Bronco truck, like,
oh my gosh.
Like, to get that as a picture vehicle in LA, you would like spend more than I spent on the entire proof of concept, right? Like it was just like, he was so, and then he ended up being in it. He's like the uncle that doesn't have any lines. He's like just hanging out. He was like, we were like, will you be our like background actor for the day? And he was like, he was super helpful. His name's Jake, and he was just like the sweetest guy, and like helped us move equipment and stuff. Just like could not have asked for a better situation. It was like that Midwestern like generosity that you always hear about was just very on display at that point. And you know, it was kind of like, it was our last hope for finding a location that day, and it worked out perfectly. And you know, super thankful that he was down to be involved.
You know, that's how you know that project was supposed to happen, when it happened, where it happened, and how it happened. Honestly, because like,
yeah, it was very like synchronicity happening.
Yeah, it was kismet for KINETIC.
It was.
Oh, forgive me. That was bad. I'm sure there are a number of festivals that you can submit your work for. You mentioned that you've done this festival previously. What drew you to the Indie Shorts International Festival in the first place?
Yeah, so last year like I mentioned, I had a short film, Dispel, that played there, and it's one of the biggest like shorts festivals in the world, and so it's
Oh,
very popular. A
really?
lot of people submit to it.
Interesting.
It is, yeah. It's the biggest one in the Midwest for sure, and it's on like the there's a list of Academy qualifying short film festivals, and it's on that list, which makes it very
Uh,
exclusive, and people want to play there.
yeah.
And so I'd heard of it that way, and then a couple of organizations that I belong to, I'd heard of it, and I'd heard people having very good experiences there, and
Hmm.
I submitted and was a part of it, and just had a lot of fun and met really great film nerds there. It was like I met people from all over the world. With like, I was in London in November and like met up with one of the women I met at Indie Shorts. Like,
Oh, fun.
it's a big festival with people from all over, and it was a really good time, and I'm super bummed that I don't get to go back this year because they're not an in-person thing per se, but looking forward to seeing all the other films that play this year.
Hmm.
And then after I had made KINETIC and was sort of just setting it out, like I said, with the script as a proof of concept, I was thinking about possibly submitting it to festivals, but it's a proof of concept. It doesn't wrap everything up in it. You don't get all the answers. It's not like a self-contained short film, which is
Hmm.
mostly what I've done before, and so I didn't know exactly how that would fit in, necessarily to a festival sort
Hmm.
of program. But Indie Shorts has an Indiana Spotlight where they program 2 blocks of films that are either completely made in Indiana or, partially made by an Indiana
Oh.
resident, something like that, right?
Mhm.
And so I submitted to that, and I was like, hey, we literally shot this like because we were at Indie Shorts and we had like a 95% Indiana crew. And it was just like it's part of the story, really.
Yeah.
And so I was thrilled to be selected for that program. And yeah, it's cool because like like I said, I'm from the Midwest, not Indiana. I'm from Illinois, but we're
It counts.
borders, cousins, whatever. And it's cool to see. I'm looking forward to seeing all the other films in that category. Like, I've seen the trailers and read about them, and just to see what sort of filmmaking looks like outside of like New York or LA. I think it's an
Yeah.
interesting sort of perspective that, I think when you live in a huge city for a long time, you get sort of in a bubble about things. And
Yeah.
even with filmmaking, you can get in a bubble about what a short film is, or like your perspective
Hmm.
on it, or you have to have like huge name talent or whatever the case may be. So seeing other films that were made sort of in this state where it's not known as a filmmaking
Yeah.
center, I think it's really important to just diversify the voices that are telling these stories, and to be able to showcase that, I think, is a great thing that Indie Shorts does.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on Atlanta being a new popular film TV location?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never been to Atlanta, and therefore I've
Mm.
never shot there. I know people complain about the humidity, but like, as a Midwesterner, I don't mind humidity. So I don't, I think, it's hard because I think so much of the economy in Los Angeles depends upon shows and
Right.
movies shooting here, that it is sort of like a double-edged sword of like, we want to be able to keep, film production big in LA to be quite honest, like, to support smaller film production.
Absolutely.
If you go to get a film permit and you're a student filmmaker, you get a big break because studio pictures are paying so much more for their permits. I think, and
Mm-mm.
I think that sort of supports, in a way, younger up and coming voices.
Yeah.
But on the other end, like, I don't know, who am I to who am I to dictate where people should shoot things? I
Yeah.
love going different here's the thing. I think if you're like going other places and shooting, and you're just shooting in a stage, it's like, yeah, you're just doing it because
Yeah,
it's
you're
cheaper.
just
It's like,
yeah. Hmm.
that's the only reason. If you're
Yeah.
going and shooting because it's like part of the story or the
Like
environment,
Walking
or
Dead was shot in.
Yeah.
And like, that makes sense. They did that because literally the landscape, not because it was just gonna be cheaper.
Right, exactly. So I think if you like have a reason for it, great. But I think the hard thing for me is like knowing so many people that aren't necessarily department heads and that work as grips or art PAs or whatever the case may be. I think it's hard to see when those jobs get lost. That's one, because I mean, you're not going to move. No one's going to fly you out to grip on a show, right? They're going to fly you out to direct it or to be a key like crew member. But so I think it's I think part of it is sort of doing what we can on our end in LA to like talk to our representatives and make sure that the tax breaks and the state incentives are happening for productions in LA. And then the other part is learning to be flexible. And I've only been in the business for 10 years, but even in that time I've seen it change and shift. And the one thing I know about the industry is that it's always changing. And so learning to sort of be flexible where you can, I think, is an important part of sort of staying in it.
Absolutely. You mentioned London. Were you in London for business or pleasure?
I was not there for business. My husband was, so I got to tag along. He was shooting a big Under Armour commercial all over the world, and then his last week, he's a cinematographer, his last week was in Manchester. And the UK is just like my favorite place in the world. So I was like, I'll see you out there. Like I'm coming out for the free hotel room for a week. And I'll see you when you're like at dinner or something. But he worked for a week in Manchester and I was there, and then we spent a week in London, which like, thank goodness we did that. 'Cause like, I don't know when we're going to be able to do that again. So honestly, I'm very grateful I was there. Recently.
I feel you. So how was working with Amy Davidson and Violet Brinson?
It was great. I was so grateful to get both of them on board. I felt very lucky to have them in this, just little proof of concept film that I was making for no money in Indiana. I had known their work before I started casting. Violet I had seen in Sharp Objects when I watched that. I think it came out like early last year. And so she was in that with her sister. They're like the like rollerblading teens in the town, and so I'd seen her in that. And then Amy, I mean, years ago, obviously I'd seen her in 8 Simple Rules, and then she's just in everything. Like my husband and I did a house rewatch during quarantine, and in one episode we were like, hey, it's Amy, she just like shows up in everything. And so I knew both of them. And I try to like do my due diligence as a director of like meeting with people more than once, reading with them more than once, doing all of that. But honestly, most of the time I just know within like the first minute of meeting someone if they're right for the role.
Oh, absolutely.
And that was very much the case with both of them. So I had no sort of like image in my mind of like what they should look like or whatnot, but it just so happened that like this woman and this young woman both came in who like looked like they could be related and really embodied both of the like roles very well, which was great. When someone's related, you're like hoping that you'll find someone that could possibly be related to them. When you're casting families, like, oh, it can be a scary adventure. Yeah. But I was very lucky, and Violet came in and she just had sort of this like very sweet, sort of very just like open, vulnerable personality, but also like had that streak of like teenage rebellion I could like kind of pull out of her and get her to be a little bit more defiant, which was perfect. And then Amy is like, she's like such a sweet person, and I feel like a lot of times like when I've seen her in roles too, she like plays this like very sweet, bubbly person, and to like be able to get like that sort of rage that I think everyone kind of has like just below the surface, and to be able to like play with that was really fun. And Aunt Drea is a tough character to play because she is she's very smart. She's very like, conniving is such a bad word, but I mean, that's kind of the case. That's what she is. But, you know, it's all for a purpose. It's all, she's trying to protect her niece and make money to be able to like take care of her family. And she's like the head of the family, so she has to take care of everyone. So there is that part of it that's coming from a vulnerable place that she just can't show, or, you know, show weakness.
Right.
But it is from a place of love. So it was, you know, I felt really confident that the role was in Amy's hands, and the same with Violet. You know, Jess is like a teenager that just has a really been dealt a terrible card in life. And you know, playing with that sort of, you know, age of you're still really dependent like financially and for your safety and everything on your parent or your parent figure, but like you're developing to a point where you're just like, no, I'm an adult. Like, I know what I need. And sometimes, honestly, teenagers do. Like, sometimes they know, you know, more about their situation than the adults in their lives. And so getting to play with that age range is just, it's really fun because there's so many complex emotions and thoughts and everything going on in their lives at that point. And Violet was just, yeah, she was just the perfect Jess. And I called my sister like the night after our rehearsals, because I'm the youngest, and I was like, I wish she was my little sister, because I always wanted a little sibling, and I was like, she would be a great little sister. But you know, it was really fun, and when you work on location, you know, you get to like, you spend all day with people, you know, you're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, you're hanging out after shooting, like all of that. And so they were just like the most pleasant, nice people to work with in the middle of nowhere, Indiana.
That's so good that it sounds like you've been able to create an environment on your set that is nurturing to the creative process and allowing your actors to play with these roles, because so many times that's not the case, where you know, a lot of people don't allow their actors to find, I don't want to say a lot of people, some people,
yeah, some people. there are people
there are people
there are directors
that don't allow the actor's own interpretation to come through in order to I don't know, find a really organic presentation. Finding words are difficult for me. You know what I'm trying to say. You know, that's such a great environment to be in as an actor.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that. It is something that I really try and work towards, and it's just, you know, in the same way that I collaborate with department heads, like there's a reason that I hire a costume designer. Mine is named Bree Perry. Everyone should hire her. She's amazing. She's New York based. But you know, there's a reason I hire her, is because I'm not going to go and pick out the exact outfits. Like, I need her input. I need someone who specializes in that to help with that aspect of it. So why would I treat actors any differently? Like, they bring their instruments, they bring their background and all of their experiences to it. And it's a real collaboration. And it's, you know, I find that like, in collaborating, you're always going to get a better performance, and it's going to elevate the story to something that maybe you hadn't thought of before, or just, you know, take it in a way that is grounded. And like you said, that sort of organic, you know, feeling to the characters can only come, I think it comes in two parts. Is firstly, you have to cast correctly. That's, casting is such a huge part of it. And it's, you know, obviously like casting a good actor, someone that can take direction, all of those things you want, but it has to be someone that like fits the role. And that has nothing to do with like what someone looks like or anything physical, but just the personality that they bring to it.
Energy.
The energy that they bring is such an important part of it. And then, like you said on set, just like having the ability to collaborate. And, you know, I like doing rehearsals, and, you know, a lot of times I'll do like a couple like improv rounds of the script, and just like, if there's a line that just is bumping for some reason, like that's the great thing about writing and directing, is I can be like, say it in your own words, and then literally just like change the script on my computer as we're rehearsing to reflect that line that it feels more natural to the character, you know, because you don't know until you hear it. And so that's a really, like, I always feel like that's a gift to me when they when they come up with a better line that I came up with. It's like, I'm gonna steal that, thank you. That's gonna go in the script, and we're gonna do it that way. But yeah, I do, like, that's just part of the fun of working with actors. And I personally have never been an actor, but I have taken several acting classes just to understand what actors go through and what sort of language they use and all of those things. And so just from like literally a friends and family night, I know how difficult it is to perform. You know, I'm obviously being sarcastic, but you know, like even at that very small stakes level, I'm like, oh, this is a hard job. Let's make it easier on people by being open to their ideas and not like doing line readings at them and expecting them to be trained monkeys, you know? That's my personal philosophy.
I had heard, okay, so Lin-Manuel Miranda, there was one day, I don't remember what interview he was doing. He was on some talk show, and they were asking him about like how it feels if he like messes up on stage, and he was like, I'm the writer, okay? He was like, if I mess up, that's a rewrite, okay? I was like, that is amazing. Hysterical. Oh man. So a lot of your work centers around female characters. Do you ever put pieces of yourself in them?
Yeah, I think all the time. I can't think of like a character that I haven't put sort of myself into. It sounds like a very self-centered thing, but you know, I think so. Going back to taking acting classes very early on when I was out in LA and working in the industry, I took a couple of acting classes to sort of help with my writing. And I feel like I sort of developed a way of writing that came out of those classes where I am very focused on, you know, the experience of the character and like what they're going through in the moment and just being able to put myself in their shoes. So regardless of like if I'm writing someone much older than me, much younger than me, a guy, whatever the case is, you know, I think you have to put themselves or yourself in their shoes to be able to write like a well-rounded character. And so I feel like, and it's so hard because sometimes people will be like, oh, who would you cast in this role? And then I'm like, oh, I wasn't thinking of anyone except myself when I was writing. It was like, oh, that's why I said, like, when I was casting Jess, I was like, I didn't have like an actor in my mind. I was like, oh, it's me, you know, it's from that character's point of view. So this is me as I'm writing it. So that on the directing side, I kind of have to like step aside from that and be like, okay, let's move on from this being all about you. But it, you know, it is, I put a lot of like, not necessarily literally, but you know, situations that I've been in my life or feelings that I've gone through or stuff like that. I've really plays into it. And I think that sort of connects back to what we were talking about earlier with like the superhero genre, right? It's like at the end of the day, you can have a movie about Captain Marvel or Wonder Woman. You can have women directing these movies, but they're all based off of IP that was originally written by men, and the mythology and the backstory and all of that. And, you know, I have nothing against men. They're great, but like writing a female in those situations, I think it becomes much stronger if you have a woman who is drawing on her own experience to be able to impart that to an audience, just because, you know, you can feel when those experiences are like, oh, that's something that's happened to me, or I felt that, or like, yeah, I've had that fight with my mom, or, you know, whatever the case is. I think just being able to like develop sort of your own, like, it within like the field of genre specifically, I guess I'm talking about now, but to be able to develop like your own sort of mythology is I think it's really powerful when it comes from a more diverse voice or a background that we haven't necessarily heard from before.
Do you ever do you ever get really attached to maybe a particular scene in a script that just won't work and it's difficult to rewrite? You know, like is it like painful to be like, I thought this was gonna work so well, and then it's just nothing's working?
Yeah, I mean that happened on the film I did before KINETIC. Dispel. I and we shot the scene and it was fine, but it just didn't end up working in terms of like the rhythm of the story. It was like I had an extra beat that just, it was like, oh, this just feels like extra. And it was like supposed to be this really cool scene where like this street light turned on and it had like all this like magical like dust and it was very like galaxy, like magical stuff going on. It was going to be beautiful and wonderful. And just in the rough cut, I was like, this doesn't need to be here. It was so hard. And it was like our last shot of the entire film. We like were worried we weren't going to make our day and lose the sunlight, but we ended up getting it. And we were all so excited that we got it. And then I had to like be the jerk that was like, oh, we didn't actually need that, guys. Sorry about that. You know, it's just, it can be really like devastating, but you're only doing a disservice to the project if you can't get over that, you know, like you know, holding on to it, which is, you know, it's interesting because most of the time I write and direct and edit all my own work, so I really had to build up like a separation of all of those things and like compartmentalize. Like when I'm editing, I can't think about how long it took us to get that shot on the day. When I'm directing, I can't think about how excited I was when I like came up with that line. You know, it's like it's just learning that like after that stage is over, you have to like let go of it and let it be.
And let it be. That's so tough. It's like, well, you know, especially I feel like personally for me, I would really struggle with letting go of certain like script things, writing. I'm bad at editing as I go, and you can't you have to just like put it down and then edit. And I always like over edit, and then I think it's perfect, and then it's not. This is even in just like writing scripts for the podcast, like the researched episodes. I'm like, this is going to be so good, and it doesn't work. And then I'm like, oh, that took me hours, and you just have to let it go. That's
one thing that I like to tell myself, because I bump up against that in writing all the time, where I'm like, I just wrote 10 pages and I'm going to delete all of them. But I will, like, I've really come to tell myself that, like, nothing is a wasted page. Like, no word is wasted. You had to write those 10 pages to delete them to then write the next 10 pages. Like, that's the only way you're going to get to the next step of it. So
absolutely. Yeah. The reason you're deleting those 10 pages is because you got a better idea from those 10 pages. That's a good way to look at it.
Nothing's wasted. Just some stuff doesn't get seen by anyone but you.
Some things are just for you.
Exactly.
Well, your previous works have received acclaim, as has this one. Do you ever feel pressure to one-up yourself?
You know, I really, and I'm not perfect at this, but I try really hard to focus on the process and not on the outcome or the results. You know, and so I think like winning an award or, you know, getting picked to screen at a festival, like those things are great in terms of like, they're like throwing another log on the fire, right? It's like your excitement for your craft builds because you're like, cool, other people recognize that I'm doing work and that's exciting. But it can't be the focus. And I'm, like I said, I am not perfect at that. Sometimes I get, you know, those like crazy highs when you're like, yeah, I like won something. And then the next day you're like, what does it all mean? Which like I just, every year after the Oscars, I'm like, what are they feeling today? Like what's going on today? You know, I always wonder about the next day.
That like, I'm sure they feel
that like come down, like,
can't even get out of bed. You're just like,
I've reached the pinnacle. So I try not to focus on that. I think for me, like the one-upping or whatever it is could like, I do try to take lessons that I've learned from the previous project and implement them on my next project. So whether it's a directing thing or a writing thing, like I just try to use what I learned from the previous experience to be better at the next project I'm working on, and I try to focus on that.
Yeah, both all the good and the bad. I'm sure you've learned some things
So
on
many,
set where
like,
you're like,
so many
never
mistakes.
again.
Yeah, I mean, and that's when you learn the most, is when you make a mistake. So you have to
absolutely
say thank you and move on and remember it for the next time.
Yeah. Definitely. So speaking of awards and patting yourself on the back, what was receiving the Mary Shelley Award at Otherworlds 2019 like?
That was it was very unexpected. So that was like really, it was great. I think just the fact that the award exists, first of all, was a really cool thing. Because it is, you know, I hate labels and stuff like that, but I do prefer to work in genre film, you know, and so the women's voices, I think it's sort of a double thing where like women's voices are more needed in those films, but because they are sort of more specialty, I think it's also a really good in for women in filmmaking.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, it felt very validating to be like, oh, you recognize that I'm a woman and I like to make like genre films, and that's really cool. Thank you. And it is like Otherworlds Austin is such a well curated festival. Like I have to shout them out for that. It's 3 days and it's all genre, and it's just like, I've been to a lot of film festivals. I've been to several genre film festivals, but their festival director, their team that watches everything, like it's just the best of the best. And so that was like, to get that award there, I was like, are you sure? Me? Okay, thank you. It was really meaningful, and it was also just like a really nice weekend, because my one of my best friends had just moved to Austin, and she was like 5 months pregnant. It was the first time I got to like go and see her pregnant, and like, you know, just like hang out for the weekend. It was the first time I had seen her since she moved, so it was just like last December. It was just a lovely weekend all around, personally and professionally.
I love that. And you mentioned, you know, females in specifically genre. You advocate for female representation behind the camera. Why is it important that we have more women working behind the camera, specifically in the sci-fi superhero genre? I feel like we've touched on it here and there throughout our conversation so far.
Yeah, I feel like, so I've said a lot of like, it's very important to get those experiences, not just from a perspective of the actor in the main role as a female, or the, you know, the, even just the director being female. I feel like the writer coming up with those experiences, the director framing them in a way that is authentic to a young woman or a woman's experience is so important. And it's just, because we're other humans that have experiences in the world, you know, there's no like, we're not alien creatures that have just arrived on this planet. Like, we're half of the population, and so like, let's represent that half of the population. And then the other thing I will say here, and this has been something that's my consciousness has been raised a lot around recently, is that we cannot have female representation unless we represent all females, and we're intersectional in that approach. We can't have female representation if we're not representing women of color, and that, you know, whether it's a Black woman, a Latino woman, an Asian woman, an Indigenous woman, whatever the case may be. As women, as white women, we have white privilege, and we have to use that white privilege to advocate for the women who don't have that privilege, who are women of color. And so that is something that, you know, and I think we've all of us in the past, you know, couple of months, our consciousness has been raised around that. And it's something that I'm very passionate about at the moment, and hope to sustain throughout the movement of raising those voices. And if that means like taking a step back at times to promote women of color in the film industry, like, I'm happy to do that. We can't have equality if it's not equal for everybody. And I very much feel that in my industry and whatever industry you may be in, like, that is the fight we need to be fighting right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, it is so important for us to recognize, and not just recognize and acknowledge, but to actively take steps to make sure that we are doing everything that we possibly can to help amplify and yeah, raise these voices that have been marginalized for no explicable reason.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, you know, and I think for me, my sort of journey to that was like, it's hard because when you are a woman, you're like, but I'm a woman and all these men are so much further along in their career than me. And like, I'll sit here and whine about it. And then I have to look at myself honestly and be like, I have benefited from a lot of privilege in my life just because of the color of my skin. And that is absolutely ridiculous and not at all earned. And now it's up to me to like figure out how I can take what I've learned and, like you said, like turn it into actionable steps to be like, here's a list of Black female directors that you should go watch their movies. While I'm at it, go watch The Old Guard on Netflix, directed by a very talented Black woman. Like, you know, that's like, those are the things that we need to be doing. And I'm super grateful for, you know, all the ways that it was brought to my attention. And I feel like, you know, hopefully a tide is turning and hopefully there's enough people on board with this that will make some real progress. And you know, while we're all sitting at home not being able to do anything, like, let's do this.
Yes, absolutely, let's do this. Speaking of uplifting and supporting other women, have you yourself found a group of women in the field that you feel are continually supportive of one another and are always uplifting each other?
I am very lucky to be a member of Alliance of Women Directors. It is an LA-based organization that promotes the development and education of women identifying and non-binary directors. We also have an Atlanta chapter. And there's about 440 members, I believe. And it, like you said, it is a group of women that are constantly uplifting one another. It provides educational support. It provides, you know, we do a thing called Works in Progress program, which I put KINETIC through, and I also put my last short film, Dispel, through, where you take your unfinished work in a group of, you know, when we can be in person, like 30 of your peers get to sit there and watch it and give you feedback on it. And
that's great.
It's amazing because it's just, it's honest feedback in a very collaborative and supportive way. And it's from other women in the industry who come from all backgrounds and can watch it, you know, because you get in that rut where you're sending things to like your three closest friends or something, and it, you know, they're always going to be like, this is great. And you kind of know their background and you know their experience, and so you kind of know what they're going to like and what they won't like. But when it's a bunch of women just coming together from a bunch of different backgrounds or from different places in the country or the world, like everyone is able to give feedback, and you're able to sort of learn what you did right, what you can improve on, how an audience views it. Is that how you meant for them to view it? And it's just like a super powerful thing. And you know, I think that before I joined AWD, it was like I was trying to do that on my own. I was trying to be like, hey, who do you know that's a female director? Hey, do you know, or a friend would work on a set with a female director. I'd be like, hey, can I have her email? You know, like just trying to like build that community for myself, because I didn't know anyone, you know, in my like close circle of friends that was a female director. And so AWD just had that built in. And they have a lot of like mentorship opportunities, and just, I don't know. I've been in it almost 2 years, and it's been a really positive experience for me. And I feel like I've learned a lot, both as a filmmaker and a person. And I formed like a lot of really great female friendships, and just had like the ability to not only like put my stuff through Works in Progress, but be able to see everyone else's films and what other people are doing. And it's just a really great supportive community. And I, you know, if you're interested.
It sounds really healthy too. Like, It sounds, based on specifically the works in progress program,
Mm-hmm.
that's so constructive,
Yeah.
and that's something that is so necessary throughout all creative processes, really
Mm-hmm.
all processes in general. You need
Yeah.
constructive criticism the whole time. And it's nice when you know that you're going to have a group of people that are on your side. They're on your team and they want you to succeed. They're not going to
Yeah.
be people that are going to try to one up you, or
Yeah.
turn it into this competitive, like, there's
Yeah.
room for all of us. There's room
Yeah.
for everyone.
That's such an important message, especially concerning what I was just talking about. Like, there is room for everyone at the table.
Mm.
And that's something we talk a lot about in AWG, is like, with certain like studio programs or labs or whatever, it can sometimes feel like we're competing against each other for like the one slot they reserve for the woman on the team or whatever. And it's like, no, we're gonna change that. We're gonna change the way this works and make it more equitable for everyone, and just be able to uplift each other, and like you said, not compete. There's not, when someone in our group like does something good, it uplifts all of us. It makes everyone see that a female director can do something amazing, and promote that, and I think I was gonna make another point and I totally lost my train of thought.
Reeled.
Oh, it went somewhere else. I don't know where it went.
That's okay. It'll come back to you.
It will.
But
3 a.m.
Yeah. You sent me an email with like an audio clip of you saying it.
Don't put it past me.
Yeah, it's something where someone recently was saying, like, because of the fact that a lot of this industry has in a way pitted women on this side. We're really also actors,
Mm-hmm.
on all sides of the filmmaking industry, feel very pitted against each other.
Mm-hmm.
That it's important for us to also just like make our own table.
Yeah.
Like, fine, if you don't want to hear from all of us, we'll just make our own table and we will make this happen in this way, so that you can see it doesn't need to be this toxic, competitive in a bad way. Competitive is great when it's constructive competition, not when it's
when it's like in a healthy
toxic
environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're told that there is a scarcity, then of course you're gonna try and get what you need to get to survive. But that's a complete lie. Basically, I mean, that's exactly it. It's just a lie. And we have to I think working from both angles of like trying to sort of change the systems that be from within, while also, like you said, just like setting up our own systems of getting our work out there and promoting each other, and really just being loyal to other women and not feeling that there's only room for one of us, because that's not the case.
Yeah, not at all. Not the case. Do you ever question yourself?
This is such a good question. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Constantly, every day, every word I type. Maybe not every word I type. Yeah, I think it's it's actually been very interesting in quarantine, because I have a lot of friends who I feel like are going through what I go through just in normal times, who are like, maybe I should go to law school. Maybe should I go back to college and like do a new major? And I'm like, oh, you guys are going through what I go through every day of my life. But I mean, whenever you're getting to a point where like, oh, I don't know about this, of course you start to like imagine different futures. Sometimes my husband says he's gonna like be an alpaca farmer, and then I tell him what time you have to wake up to work a farm, and he's not.
He's like, oh, hard pass.
Yeah, no, wait, every day you don't get a vacation? They need to eat every day. You know, so I think obviously, like, yeah, I question sort of like everything. And I think that filmmaking as a medium, and I'm sure there's other mediums like this, I just am not involved in them, but filmmaking is such a long-term investment, you know. Like I said, my last short film, Dispel, I wrote the first draft of that in late 2017, and I'm still promoting it, and it's playing festivals online this summer. So it's a long road, and that's like a 15-minute piece of work that is like 3 years of work.
Yeah,
you know, has gone into it so far. And it's just, filmmaking is just such a long process, and development is such a long process, and sending out scripts that, you know, you're like, this is amazing, and then nothing happens with it, and then you have the next script ready to go. You know, it really is one of those things that, like, I used to hear this and be like, that, I don't know if I believe that, but now I definitely believe it. It's like, if I could do anything else, I would be doing it. Like, if I in my soul could, like, be happy doing something else, I would probably be doing it, because it is just such a journey with filmmaking, with writing and directing. It's just, you know, you're working on the same project for a year. You're trying to get something sold. It's, you know, it's very slow. It can cause you to question yourself when you're not seeing movement on things. And then a global pandemic happens, and nothing in the world is happening, and you're like, is this for everyone? Like, why is this happening? Not to make light of a pandemic. It's a horrible situation, and but for everyone in every career, I think, is having that right now. But it's just, you know, so I questioned myself of like, is this the right thing I should be doing? Is this ever going to lead to where I want it to lead? But I think, you know, like I said, when you asked about the award, it's like, yeah, when something like that happens, it's like, okay, cool. Like, other people recognize that this is something I'm doing. It seems like I'm on the right track. And I have to lean back on, like, my very deep belief that, like, this is exactly what the universe wants for me. And that, I hate sounding so, like,
no,
or whatever, but I really, like, it's what all of my skills point to. It's like, I've been obsessed with movies my entire life. Like, my first memories are, like, the first movies that my brother played for me on VHS. Like, it's just, there's nothing else I want to do with my life. And I feel like if I'm the only one that ever enjoys my films, like, oh well, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
I keep quoting random people, but there was an interview, actually it was Billie Eilish, and she was like, someone was like, what do you have to say to people who, like, think you're weird and your music is crazy? She was like, honestly, if there was an apocalypse and everybody died except for me, and all I have is the work that I've created, and I don't like it, then what's the point? So I make what's for me, and if I like it, then that's the point of it. Otherwise, like, if I don't enjoy it, then why am I doing it? And I was like, oh, she was like 16 when she said that, and I was like, oh my God.
I love the wisdom that comes from children, who now, she is now a young woman, but that is very wise. And also, it's so upsetting that someone as, like, accomplished and recognized as Billie Eilish is still getting asked those silly questions.
Right? Like, where they're like, oh, people don't like you. Okay.
People think you're weird. You know, it's just like, yeah, man, every one of us is weird. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Just all weird in our own ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get to our last two questions, is there anything else that you would like to add, where we can follow you in your career, festival information, or anything else that we didn't discuss that you would like to?
Yeah, so if you want to see more of my work, you can find it on my website, which is KylieEatonFilm.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Kylie109. And that's where I post all my stuff. I don't tweet because it scares me. What else? So yes, Indie Shorts. KINETIC is streaming on the online festival platform, so check that out. I'm doing a live Q&A on the 26th for that, with other filmmakers in the Indiana Spotlight block. And yeah, that's everything, I think.
Amazing. So I ask the same last two questions to everyone that comes through the podcast. First, what is your second favorite color?
I think my second favorite color is purple.
What kind of purple?
Yeah. I like a deep sort of like a royal purple, like a good deep gemstone purple.
Yeah. Why do you like that color?
I don't know. There's something my favorite color is blue because it's calming and I need calming influences in my life. And also I think when I was little, I was very rebellious, and whenever girls said pink, I was like blue. Just because I always wanted to be contrary. But I think if I hadn't had that experience, purple would be my first favorite color instead of my second. I don't know, just when I look at it, it's it reminds me of galaxies and stars and sort of
that makes sense. Honestly,
things.
That feels really on brand.
Thank you. I'm so sad that your listeners can't see my moon necklace and my star earrings. It is my brand. Thank you for noticing.
And lastly, what, in your opinion, is the best part of being a woman?
So I kind of bump against this question because I don't really buy into men and women being different naturally. I think we're just conditioned differently. But that being said, in my experience of growing up as a girl and being a woman in the world today, I think the best part about it is the very deep female friendships that I have in my life. The deep relationships I have with other women. I think I make acquaintance, friendly friend relationships easier with guys just because maybe I'm around them more, or maybe because I know how much I put into to my relationships with other women. They're deep, it's I've got your back through whatever, I'm there with you to celebrate, I'm there with you to cry. But when I think about my life, outside of my husband, who I love very much, the most important people are my sister and my female friends. Those are the people that I love more than anything and would do anything for. And it's just that bond is you could potentially divorce a spouse, but you can, there's just certain friends that you will never be able to get rid of. Oh. They are in your life and you are in their life. And I think that's and like I said, it is of course it is cultural conditioning that we're encouraged to talk about our feelings in a way that men aren't, but because of that, I found very deep connections with other women. That's such that's where I turn when I'm having a bad day, or whatever the case is. I think that's a really special, magical thing we get to experience.
Yeah, it's so funny what you were saying about some friends that you're just never gonna get rid of. And it's so interesting because it made me think of the ones I have in my life, and they're they're people that instantaneously as soon as you meet them, you just know. You're yep, that's one. Add that.
Those are my people. You're my person. We're in this now.
Can't get rid of me.
Yep. So I would say that's the best part about being a woman.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I love what you're doing. I love everything that you stand for, and I cannot wait to see what's next from you, because I know there's so much that's going to happen in your career, and I'm so excited that our paths have crossed and that I get to just watch your career just launch. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us again. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. You know the drill, just so that we can continue to grow and reach as many people as possible. Check out our website at ofherstory.com. Follow us on the social medias, Twitter at the Her Story Pod, Instagram at Women of Her Story Podcast, or send us an email to womenofherstorypodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, be safe, stay healthy, and show the world what you're made of.
This is a New York Glitch production. You are the worst.